Hey there, it's Ashley at Smart Addition Academy. In today's video, we are going to go through a full-length math test for the HESI exam. I'll go through each question and you can follow along while I solve it. Before we jump in, be sure to check out the links in the description of this video, where you will find links to a free HESI practice test, just like the one we will go through together today. You'll find a free HESI bootcamp, the Smart Addition HESI online course, and our HESI Facebook study group. All right, let's jump into it. Okay, so we are going to go through 50 questions together today, all for the Math HESI exam. So question number 1, we have 62 hundredths times 34 hundredths. So for this, I would just plug this right into your calculator. You're given a calculator with the 4 basic operations. So I would plug this right in, and when you do, you will get this. And although that is not one of our answer options, we're going to choose the one that is closest. So our answer here would be 21 hundredths. Okay, here's question number 2. Write 0.1, and that dash above it means repeating. So 0.1 repeating as a percent. 0.1 repeating just means 0.1111, and that would go on forever. So if we want to write that as a percent, to go from a decimal to a percent, we can just move our decimal place over 2 times to the right. So that would give us 11.111. So that would be repeating. So 11.1 repeating percent would be our answer. Okay, so just swoop your decimal to the right twice, and we can find our percent. Now we're on to question number 3, fractions. So we need to add 3/8 plus 5/6. So when we have to add a fraction, we need to have a common denominator. So to have a common denominator, I will show you 2 ways to go about that. Option number 1 is just to take your denominators, 8 and 6, and multiply them. So 8 times 6 is 48. And if you don't know that off the top of your head, that is okay. We can plug it into our calculator to get 48. So what we do from here is we're trying to create equivalent fractions with a denominator of 48. So I'm going to look here and say, well, to get from the 8 to the 48, I multiplied by 6. And if I do it on the bottom, I have to do it on the top because I want these to stay equivalent. So 3 times 6 would be 18. Okay, now I have to do that for my second fraction. 6 times, we did times 8 here. So 5 times 8 is what we need for the top, which is 40. Okay, so now I have 18 48ths plus 40 48ths. Let me just get this on out of the way. And I'm going to add because now I have a common denominator. So 18 plus 40 would be 58. So 58 48ths is my answer. However, I don't see that as one of my options. So it looks like I need to turn this into a mixed number. So 48, I can pull out of 58 one time, and I'll have 10 left over. So 1 and 10 48ths would be an answer, but again, I don't see that. So final step here, I'm just going to rewrite it. Okay, final step here would just be to simplify my fraction, and because these are both even, I can divide by 2, and I will get 1 and 5 24ths as my answer. Okay, so that's one way to go about it. You could always just multiply your denominators to get a common denominator. Okay, another way that we could do this is we could try to find a common multiple of 8 and 6. So if we find the least common multiple, that'll be the quickest way. So I might just make a list. 8, 16, 24, 32. And for 6, it would be 6, 12, 18, 24. Oh, there we go. We found our least common multiple. So I'm going to use 24 as my new denominator. So 3/8 plus 5/6, I want to rewrite with a denominator of 24. So again, 8 times what got me to 24? Well, it looks like I had to multiply by 3. So if I do it on the bottom, I also have to do it on the top. Okay, so that is the same thing as 9 24ths. Second fraction, 6, I'm going to multiply by 4. 5 times 4 will be 20. So this is my new problem to solve. So I'm going to do 9 20 fourths plus 20 20-fourths, and that will give me 29 over 24, which again, I need to turn into a mixed number. So 24 goes into 29 once with 5 left over. So you'll see either way, we get 1 and 5 20-fourths. Okay, moving right along here. We have another percent question. Which percent is closest to the ratio 7:3? So when we're talking about ratios, this one is written with that semicolon, or colon, I guess. But we can also write that as a fraction. So 7/3 is another way to write that. So 7/3 we need to turn into a percent. Okay, so one thing that we can do with a fraction is really, this is just a division problem. So we can do 7 divided by 3. Okay, and again, we have a calculator, so we can just plug that right into our calculator. And when I do 7 divided by 3, I'm going to get 2.3 repeating. So it kind of just goes on forever. And if you remember from that earlier question, to go from a decimal to a percent, we just swoop it twice. Okay, and so we would get 233.3 repeating percent. So I'm going to choose the option that's closest to that, which would be 233. So just another thing to note for this question is that 7/3 as a fraction, that is greater than 1. So when you have 1, that is the same thing as 100%. Okay, so 1 is equal to 100%. Greater than 1 would have to be greater than 100%. So the only option that even makes sense here would be 233%. We have a word problem. Let's check it out. So Kendra spends $175 a month for her basic needs, such as food and gas for her car to get to work. If she's always paid twice a month and receives $525 a paycheck, how much of her monthly income should she set aside for her basic needs? Okay, so I'm seeing that she spends $175 for her basic needs, okay, and she gets paid twice a month and receives $525 a paycheck. So we need to find out how much of her monthly income she should set aside. So she makes $525 twice a month. So I'm going to multiply this by 2. Okay, 525 times 2 is 1,050. So this is how much she makes per month. Okay. Now 175 is what she spends on her basic needs. So if I take that over 1,050, I can simplify that to be one of these fractions to figure out what is the simplest form of that fraction. Okay, so when we're simplifying fractions, you just want to find something that you can use to make it smaller. That's one way to do it. It doesn't always happen in one step, but that's okay. In this case, I might say, oh, well, these both look like I could divide by 25. So when I do that, I get 7/42. And 7/42 can actually be simplified even further if I divide both of these by 7. So this turns out to be 1/6. Okay, 1/6 would be my final answer. Okay, solve for the value of x. So we have some ratios here. So this ratio is telling me that 11 to 12, okay, is going to be equal to, or is the same as, x to 96. So I'm going to set this up. Again, we talked about this earlier, taking a ratio and writing it as a fraction. I'm going to write this as a fraction, 11/12, and say, well, that is equal to x over 96. So a few different ways to solve an equation like this where you have a fraction. I might just cross multiply here and set up myself with a simple equation. So cross multiply looks like this. I'm going to multiply the things that I have circled together. So 11 times 96, I just go through and plug that in my calculator, 1,056. 12 times x is just 12x. Okay, so now from here, I need to just divide. The opposite operation of multiplication is division. So if I divide each of these by 12, I will figure out that x is equal to 88. Okay, x equals 88 would be my answer for this ratio. Okay, and this is a pretty cool question. The number 36 is what percent of 16? Okay, what percent of 16? So a few different things that we could do. Here, I'm going to show you setting this up again as a proportion. So when we do proportions for percentages, I'll give you a general formula. So it's part over whole is equal to percent over 100. Okay, so part over whole. So the tricky part here is to know what is the part and what is the whole. So the number 36 is what percent of 16. So in this case, 16 is the whole, even though it's the smaller number. That's okay. The part is 36 because we want to know, well, what percent is that of my whole of 16? So instead of percent, I'm just going to write x, so it's a little bit easier to solve. Okay, and we're going to solve this just like we did that previous question where we cross multiply. Okay, so I'm going to cross multiply and get 3,600 will equal 16 times x. And again, got to get rid of that multiplication by using division. 3,600 divided by 16 gives me 225. So x equals 225. And remember, my x was just my percent. So we have just solved for our percent, 225. Okay, speaking of equations, here's one to solve together. 5x plus 9 equals 54. So when we are solving an equation, we want to work backwards to try to get our variable by itself. So attached to my variable on this left side, I need to get rid of the 5, I need to get rid of the plus 9. So your first step is always to get rid of the addition or subtraction first. So I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides to cancel it out. When I do that, I'm left with 5x on the left, and 54 minus 9 is 45. Okay, so now I have 5 times x equals 45. I'm going to use my opposite operation of division and get x equals 9 as my answer. So 5 times 9 plus 9 should equal 54. If you go back and plug it in, that's always a great way to check, and it only takes a quick minute. So this should equal 54, which it does. We have 5 times 9 is 45 plus 9 equals 54. It checks out, so we know we did it right. Okay, so final answer, x equals 9. Okay, here's another question. We're going to do a conversion. 16,000 ounces to tons. 16,000 ounces is equal to how many tons? Okay, so it might be easier to go from ounces to pounds and then pounds to tons because those are conversions we typically know. So I know that there is 16 ounces in 1 pound. So 16,000 ounces would be 1,000 pounds. Okay, so now I can use that 1,000 pounds and say, well, how many tons is that? Because those are the same as the 16,000 ounces. So there are 2,000 pounds in a ton. Okay, so 1,000 pounds is going to be half of a ton because it's half of 2,000. So 1,000 pounds is equal to 0.5 tons. So my answer would be right here, 0.5 tons. Okay. Next question, evaluate the expression. So this is one of my favorite types of questions. We need to use what you may have in the depths of your mind remembered PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So we are going to use order of operations or PEMDAS to solve this. So first step is to solve my parentheses first. 6 times 7 is 42. So I keep everything else the same and just solve that first step. So I've taken care of my parentheses. So there's no exponents. Next, I'm looking at multiplication and division, and I'm just working from left to right for these. Okay, so I see some division here. 42 divided by 6 would be 7. So I have 2 plus 7 minus 5. Okay, all done with my multiplication and division. Next, I just have addition and subtraction. So again, I'm going to work my way from left to right and do 2 plus 7 is 9. And then 9 minus 5 is 4. Okay. PEMDAS. Check, check. We did it all. Our final answer is 4. Okay. Write 1/5 as a percent. So I'll show you 2 different ways to go from a fraction to a percent. Step number 1 is to set up that part over whole equals percent over 100 ratio that we used before. Okay, in this case, the part is already and whole already given to you in the fraction. So 1/5 is equal to percent over 100. Okay, and in this case, rather than cross multiply to try to solve, I might just look at this and say, well, how do I get from this fraction to an equivalent fraction over 100? And 5 times 20 would help me get there. So all I have to do is 1 times 20 on the top, and that will get me to 20%. Okay, so that's one way to do it, is to set up a ratio. Another thing you can do is look at your fraction, okay, and think about it as a division problem. 1/5 is the same thing as 1 divided by 5. Okay, that's what the fraction 1/5 means. And then I can just plug this into my calculator, and I would get 0.2 or 2/10. And then remember to turn 2/10 into a percent. I take my decimal and just swoop it to the right twice. And this would give me 20% as well. So 1/5 as a percent is 20%. Okay, a little bit different of a question here. We have 2:56 p.m. in military time. So military time is on a 24-hour time. Okay, so when we have p.m., that means that we have gone past the first 12 hours of the day, right, to get to p.m. Everything before that is a.m. up until noon. So when we have p.m., we need to add 12. So 2:56 p.m., we add 12 to this 2 for the hour. So I'm going to add 12 to that, and I get 14. Okay, and the minutes just say the same. So 14:56 is the same thing as 2:56 p.m. Okay, another conversion here. What temperature is 75 degrees Fahrenheit on the Celsius scale? So to go from Fahrenheit to Celsius, we need to know this conversion. Celsius is equal to 5/9 times whatever your temperature is in Fahrenheit minus 32. Okay, so this is what we need to know in order to solve this question. So I am going to plug in what I know, which is my Fahrenheit, 75 degrees. Okay, and then I'm going to work my way through here and try to solve. So I'm going to do the parentheses first. 75 minus 32 gives me 43. Okay, and now I have to multiply that by 5/9. So in order to multiply this by 5/9, it might be helpful just to put this over 1. And to multiply a fraction times a fraction, you just go across the top and across the bottom. So 5 times 43 is 215, and 9 times 1 is 9. So 215 divided by 9, when you plug that in, you're going to get 23.8 repeating. Okay, so that is super close to 24 degrees Celsius. So that is the choice that we are going to go with, 24 degrees. Okay, here we are again with another fraction question. 1 1/2 plus 2/3. Okay, 1 1/2 plus 2/3. So for this question, I might choose to turn this number into a improper fraction first, or I might choose to leave it and then worry about that later. So I'll show you both ways, and you choose the one that works for you. So to turn 1 1/2 into a mixed number, I have to do 2 times 1 is 2, and then I add the 1. So this is the same thing as 3 over 2. So I need to do 3 over 2 plus 2 over 3. So I'm going to find a common denominator, which in this case would be 6. And 3 over 2 is the same thing as 9 over 6. 2 over 3 is the same thing as 4 over 6. And then I can just add these together and get 13 over 6, which is the same thing as 2 and 1/6, because 6 goes into 13 twice with 1 left over. Okay, so that's if I want to worry about the mixed number first. If I want to just go through and leave this, I can find my common denominator first and rewrite this as 1 and something over 6, and then change this to something over 6 as well. So 1/2 is the same thing as 3/6, and 2/3 again is just 4/6. So I'll add these together and I'll get 1 7/6. 1 7/6 has an improper fraction within it, so I need to change this to a mixed number itself. So this is really the same as 1 1/6, but don't forget we have one more already from right here. So again, we get 2 1/6. Okay, 2 different ways to solve. You choose the one that works for you. Okay, 7 13/20. We need to change this to a decimal, and then it says simplify completely. So quickest way when you have a calculator to turn a fraction into a decimal is to think about your fractional part of this. This is a mixed number, so think about the fraction as a division problem. So 13 over 20 just means 13 divided by 20. So if I plug in 13 divided by 20, I get 0.65. Okay, so that's the fractional part. So I keep the 7 in front, and I just get 7 65/100 as my decimal. Okay. Easy peasy with that calculator. All right. So we are all the way up to question number 16 already. And here we are going to multiply two fractions. Well, two mixed numbers technically. So for this, I would absolutely recommend turning these into mixed numbers first. So 4 times 2 is 8. And then add 1 to that, you get 9/4. Okay. 3 times 1 is 3. Add 1 to that, you get 4/3. Okay. Oops, sorry, this should be a multiplication symbol. Silly. Okay, so 9/4 times 4/3. So from here, we can just go through and multiply across the top and across the bottom. So 9 times 4 is 36. 4 times 3 is 12. And if we go through and divide, 36 divided by 12 is 3. Okay, a little equation for us here. If x equals 6 and y equals -2, then solve the following equation. 3xy plus 2y. So what I have to do here is I have to plug in for my x's and my y's with what I was given up here. Okay, so 3 times 6 times negative 2 plus 2 times negative 2. Okay, I'm going to go through and I'm just going to multiply 3 times 6 and then times negative 2. Okay, that will get me to negative 36. And then I have to add 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4. Okay, so negative 36 plus negative 4. Okay, when we do this, we're adding negatives together, so our answer will definitely stay negative. Okay, 36 plus 4 would be 40. So this would be negative 40 as our answer. Okay, convert tons to pounds. So we talked about this conversion a little bit last time. I'm going to rewrite it here. 1 ton is equal to 2,000 pounds. Okay, we have to know that. If I need 4 tons, this is going to be 4 times as much. So just take this and multiply it by 4. 2,000 times 4 would give me 8,000 pounds. Okay. If a doctor is converting a medical dose for a prescription of 2 grams into milligrams, what will the dosage be? Okay, so I'm going to teach you a quick little mnemonic phrase that might help you when we're talking about these type of conversions with the metric system. So what I have always used is King Henry died while drinking chocolate milk. Okay, so these are all of the different prefixes for our measurements. Okay, the W here stands for the whole. Okay, so this is like a whole unit, a gram, a liter, a meter, something like that. Okay, so if we are talking about 2 grams, okay, so I have 2 here, 2 grams. Okay, I want to go to milligrams. So I have to go from the whole unit and I have to swoop 1, 2, 3 times. And notice I'm going to my right. So when I take my 2, I'm going to swoop this 3 times, 1, 2, 3 to my right. Okay, so I'm changing where my decimal point will go, and I'm adding in placeholders into each of those spots. So this becomes 2,000. So 2 grams is equal to 2,000 milligrams. You may also just remember that there is 1,000 milligrams in a gram, and that would help you get there just the same. Okay, here's another one of those order of operation or PEMDAS questions. So if you want to pause the video for a moment and try this one on your own, okay, see what you remember about the question we did before. I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. So if you're ready to see the solution, we are going to start with what's in the parentheses. So 5 times 6 is 30. Leave everything else as is. Okay, did my parenthesis. Now I'm going to work on my exponent. So 3 squared means 3 times 3, which is 9. Leave everything else as is. Now I'm going to work through multiplication and division. Working left to right, it looks like I just have this here. 30 divided by 10 is 3. Plus 9 minus 2. Addition and subtraction, again, working left to right. 3 plus 9 is 12. Minus 2 would get me to 10. All right, for this question, we need to solve for x. Again, we have done something similar to this before, so if you want to pause the video, give it a try, go for it. I am going to jump right in. We need to get rid of this 14 first. So because it is positive, we are going to subtract the 14 from both sides. So I get 8x is equal to 56. 8 times x is equal to 56. I divide each side by 8, and that will leave me with x equals 7. Okay. Justin works 34 hours a week at one job and 22 hours a week at another job. Since there are 24 hours in a day, how much of a 7-day week is Justin spending at work? So he spends 34 hours at one job and 22 hours at another. So Justin works 56 hours a week. Okay, there are 24 hours in a day. So how many hours are in a week is the question. So I'm going to take 24 and multiply it by the 7 days in a week. 24 times 7 would give me 168. So that's how many hours there are in a week total. So I take what Justin works and divide it by the 168 that there are total. And I have to simplify because this is not one of my options. So when I go here to simplify, it looks like 56 actually goes into 168 evenly. So I can divide each of these by 56 and I get 1 over 3. So Justin spends 1/3 of his week at work. Okay, another ratio question. So we might want to set this up as an equation again to try to solve. So 4 to 5 is to 12 to x. So these are equal. I'm going to set them as fractions equal to each other. And then I can either use that equivalent fraction trick or I can just cross multiply. I'm just going to show cross multiplication for this one. 4 times x will equal 5 times 12, which is 60. Divide each side by 4. And x would equal 15. Okay, evaluate the expression when m equals 5 and n equals -3. Negative m times m plus n. So we're going to plug in what we know. So m is 5, so -5, and in parentheses we have 5 plus -3. Okay, so I'm going to do what's in my parentheses first. 5 plus -3 would just be 2. And then I have -5 times 2. Okay, -5 times 2 would just be -10. So we need to remember a negative times a positive gives me a negative as my answer. The number 60 is 15% of what value? So this might be a good one for our part over whole ratio. Part over whole equals percent over 100. Okay, so part over whole equals percent over 100. So the number 60 is 15% of what value? So 60 in this case is our part, and our whole is what we don't know. It's what we want to try to solve. So I'm just going to call it x. Our percent is 15, and that's over 100. So here's another example where we can just go through and cross multiply. 60 times 100 would be 6,000, 15 times x. And then I can just divide each side by 15 to get x by itself. So 6,000 divided by 15 is 400. So 60 is 15% of 400. So here is a conversion. We need to know that 1 liter, okay, 1 liter is approximately 1.06 quarts. So we need to go from liter to quarts here. So we need to know 1 liter is 1.06 quarts. Okay, so we need to convert 8 liters to quarts. So 8 liters to quarts, so we're just going to multiply this times 8, right? 1 times 8 and 1.06 times 8. So 1.06 times 8, I just multiply that in my calculator, and I will find that I get 8.48 quarts. 8 and 48 hundredths. Okay, what is 30% of 120? Okay, so I am going to stick with my strategy that I've been using before. Part over whole equals percent over 100. 30%, what is 30% of 120? So I don't know the part for this one, it looks like. What is 30% of 120? So I don't know the part. I'm going to call it X. 120 is my whole. My percent is 30 over 100. Okay? So then I'll just go through cross multiply. Okay, 100. X equals 30 times 120 would give me 3,600. And then I just divide by 100. And I get X equals 36. Okay, let me show you another way that you could be doing these problems. This one lends itself nicely to just setting up a quick little expression. So 30% of 120. If I can turn this into a decimal, then I can just multiply. So 30% is the same as 0.30. And if I multiply that by 120, that is another little shortcut to get me to my answer of 36. Okay. A builder has 8 boxes of screws in his storage. Each box contains 400 screws. Okay, so he has 8 boxes and they each have 400 screws. If he needs 640 screws to complete a project, what portion of his screws will he use? So he has 8 boxes and 400 in each. So I am going to multiply these, and he has 3,200 in total. So he needs 640. So 640 out of the 3,200 total. Okay, well, what is that going to be? So I need to figure out how to simplify this. So I see that these both have a 0 at the end. Those will cancel out. This might be a little bit easier to work with. Okay. Now from here, a lot of different ways I could get to simplifying, use whatever works for you. In this case, 64 does go into 320, so I can just divide by 64 and I will get 1/5 as my answer. So he is using 1/5 of his total screws. Okay. 8:45:30 p.m. in military time. So again, because we are talking about p.m., this is afternoon. We need to add 12 to it. So if we add 12 to our 8, we would get 20. The 45 stays the same, and we still have 30 seconds. So 20, 45, 30 would be my answer. Okay. Fraction problem, we need to subtract 2 2/3 minus 1/6. I'm going to just leave this as a mixed number and convert to a common denominator of 6. Looks like it'll work nicely. So 2/3 is the same thing as 4/6, and then I just need to subtract 1/6 from that, and I get 2 3/6. Not an option because I can still simplify a little bit further. 3/6 is the same thing as 1/2. So my final answer would be 2 1/2. Okay. If 1 out of every 250 people will contract a certain disease, will contract a certain disease, what percent of people will contract it? Okay, so 1 out of every 250 people. Okay, so we want to know the percent. So 2 ways to do this. I could do part over whole equals percent over 100. Okay, and cross multiply. So 100 would equal, let's call our percent x here, 250x. And when I divide by 250, 100 divided by 250 gives me 0.4. Okay, so that is my percent, 0.4%. Okay, another thing that you could do is you could just take 1 divided by 250. Remember, 1 over 250 is the same thing as division. Okay, and 1 divided by 250 is 0.004. But then you have to remember you need to convert it into a percent. So swoop it to the right twice and you will get 0.4%. 2 ways to get to the same answer. Another PEMDAS question, so feel free to try it out. We've been practicing. I'm going to go through and I'm going to start solving here with my parentheses. And within my parentheses, I actually have an exponent. So I need to do that exponent before I do anything else. So 2 squared means 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, now I can go through and simplify my parentheses. 4 minus 1 is 3. Okay, so next up is my exponent. I'm going to do 2 to the third. Okay, 2 to the third means 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Okay, and now next up is multiplication. 8 times 3 is 24. And now I just have subtraction and addition left, so I'm going to work from left to right. Starting here, 3 minus 4 is -1. Plus 24 gives me 23 as my final answer. Okay, a pharmacist needs to fill a prescription of 10 grams of medicine in the form of pills. If the pills are designed to be 100 milligrams of medicine each, how many pills does the pharmacist need to fill the prescription? So I have 10 grams, and I want to know how many milligrams that is because it's supposed to be given in a 100 milligram pill. So 10 grams is equal to how many milligrams? So we can either use our mnemonic phrase, King Henry died while drinking chocolate milk, or we may remember that there are 1,000 milligrams in a gram. So I can just multiply this times 1,000 and I will get 10,000. Okay, so there's 10,000 milligrams total, and it's saying that it should be given in 100 milligram doses. So I'm going to divide this by 100 to see how many pills we will need. So 10,000 divided by 100 will give me my final answer of 100 pills. Okay, another one of these ratios might be a good one for you to pause the video and practice. Okay, I'm going to set up my proportions using fractions. 6/7 is equal to 36 over x. Okay, and this one I'll just show you, other than cross multiplication, the other strategy of equivalent fractions. This one I just saw pretty quickly. 6 times 6 would get me to 36. So if I do 7 times 6 here, okay, that'll give me my answer, which would be 7 times 6 is 42. So x has to equal 42. Okay, and if you did that using your cross multiplication, you should get the same answer. All right. A nurse earns $21 an hour and 114% of her hourly rate for overtime. If she works a full 40 hours and 12 hours of overtime, how much will her paycheck for the week be? Okay, so she makes $21 an hour, okay, and she's working those full 40 hours. And then it says she makes 114% of her hourly rate for overtime. So 114% of 21. Okay, so 114% of 21. All we have to do is 21 times 1.14. Okay, we can solve this by doing 21 times 1.14. So her hourly rate for overtime, so I'll just write OT here, is $23.94, and she did 12 hours of overtime. So let's see how much she made. I'm going to start with her regular hours. 21 times 40 is $840. And then her overtime, $23.94 times 12 gives her $287.28. Sorry, let me rewrite that over a little bit. Okay, this equals $287.28. And then I just need to add these together. Okay, easy enough. Just plug it right on in your calculator. And you will get $1,127.28. Okay, so your final answer here, $1,127.28. Okay, a little bit of division with our fractions. So again, a question like this with multiplication or division with fractions, I would turn them into improper fractions and not deal with this mixed number thing here. So 10 times 2 is 20, plus 9 is 29, so 29 tenths, divided by 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7, so 7 over 2. Okay, to do division, I remember keep, change, flip, so KCF. Not quite KFC, but something like that. So keep, change, flip. So what that means is I'm going to keep my first number. I'm going to change from division to multiplication, and I'm going to flip my second number, change the top and the bottom. So really what I need to solve is 29 over 10 times 2 over 7. And when I multiply through, I get 58 over 70. And both of these are even, so I'm going to divide by 2 to get my final answer of 29 over 35. Okay. Awesome. You guys are doing a great job. You're really sticking through it. We're almost there. Let's try another percent question here. What is 45 out of 125 as a percent? So I'm going to take 45 out of 125. And what is that as a percent? Remember, it's always percent over 100. Since we're solving for our percent, I'm just going to change that to an X. So go ahead and we can do some cross multiplication. Okay, 45 times 100 equals 125 times X. And then I'm just going to use opposite operations to divide and get X by itself. So 4,500 divided by 125 gives me 36. Okay, so my answer here is written as decimal. So I need to go from 36% back to a decimal. So I have to swoop it twice to the left. 0.36 would be my answer. Okay, evaluate the expression. Another one of those questions where I would just go right on in and plug that into my calculator. And I would get 0.0546, okay, 0.0546. And if I look at my options, I see that right here in my first option. So go ahead and plug that in your calculator. Nice and easy. Okay. What is the product of 8 to 15? Okay, so that's the ratio 8 to 15 and 25%. So because these are in two different forms, one's a ratio, one's a percent, if I can get them in the same form, this will be a lot easier. Okay. Also, we need to know what this word means. Okay? And product means multiply. So I need to multiply these two numbers. I'm thinking fractions will be helpful. Another clue is that all of my choices are fractions. So nice to look at your answer choices sometimes to help. So I'm going to write 8 to 15 as 8 over 15, and I'm going to multiply that by 25%, which is 25 over 100. Okay, when I go through and multiply, I get 200 over 1,500. Okay, but I need to simplify. So it looks like I could divide both of these by 100 and get 2 over 15. Okay, so the product here is 2 over 15. Okay, a nice little equation to solve. This one has a little trick to it, so I want you to pay attention to this first step. Okay, the first step here is to get rid of the 25. So notice the 25 is positive, so I need to subtract it to get it to cancel out, right? My goal is to get it to cancel out. So don't let this -4 throw you off, okay? We need to subtract the 25. So I have -4x equals 5 minus 25 is -20, okay? -20, and I'm just going to divide each side by -4, and I will get x equals 5. Okay, convert 14 centimeters to inches. So it gives us here a note. 1 inch is equal to 2.54 centimeters to 2 54 hundredths of a centimeter. So we need to go from centimeters to inches. So 14 centimeters is equal to how many inches? Okay, I know that there's 2.54 centimeters in 1 inch. Okay, so in this type of question, I might set up, surprise, surprise, a ratio. Okay, this might be really helpful. So 14 centimeters is to x inches. We don't know this yet. Okay, that's equal to 2.54 centimeters, 2 54 hundredths of a centimeter over 1 inch. Okay, centimeters over inches. So you want to make sure you have centimeters on the top, inches on the bottom, and I'm going to go through and I'm just going to cross multiply. So I get 14 is equal to 2.54 times x. Okay, and some of you might have seen this right off the bat, that actually all we really had to do was divide the 14 by 2 54 hundredths. Okay, and we would get that x has to equal 5.5118, I believe. Let me double check that. 2.54. Yeah, and it goes on a little bit, but we could pause there and just see what our options are. So it looks like our best option is 5 51 hundredths. Okay, mixed number operation, another good one to practice. We've done a few things like this. Okay, so go ahead and give it a shot if you want. I'm going to jump right on into it, and my suggestion would be to turn these into improper fractions first. So 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, so this is the same thing as 3 halves, times 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7, so 7 thirds. Okay, go through, multiply the top, and then multiply the bottom, and then I just need to turn this into a mixed number because that's what all my answer choices are. So 6 goes into 21 3 times. Okay, 6 times 3 is 18, so that would leave me with 3 left over. But I can simplify this a little further, and that's the same thing as 3 1/2. Okay, a few more questions here. And we will start to wrap up. So what is 85% of 120? We have done a lot of these percent questions as ratios. Let me show you another way to set this up as an expression. So turn 85% into a decimal, okay, by swooping your decimal twice to the left. And then of 120, we just need to multiply this by 120. And when you plug this into your calculator, you will get 102 as your answer. 12 degrees Celsius is what temperature in Fahrenheit? Okay, so if we go back, we were using this formula before. Celsius is equal to 5/9 times Fahrenheit minus 32. Okay, so I'm going to plug in what I know, which is the 12 degrees Celsius. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to solve for my Fahrenheit. So to get rid of this 5/9, a nice little trick is multiply by the negative, or of the reciprocal, just multiply by the flip version of this. So I'm going to go through and do 12 times 9 and then divide by 5 on the left. That will give me 21.6 here. Okay, then I just have F, which is Fahrenheit minus 32. Add 32 to both sides, and we get 53.6 would be my degrees Fahrenheit. Closest answer to that is 54 degrees. Okay, 5 5/10 divided by 25 hundredths. Okay, so I would just go through and plug this right in my calculator. 5 5/10 divided by 25 hundredths, and you will get 22 as your answer. All right. A group of friends divide a box of 56 pieces of chalk to draw with on the cement. If one girl takes 8 pieces of chalk, how much of the box did she take? So there is 56 in total, and this one girl took 8. So 8 out of the 56 that we had is equal to, all of my answers are in fractions, so I'm going to keep this as a fraction and try to decide what is 8 divided by 56. And essentially all I need to do is simplify, and both of these can be divided by 8. 56 divided by 8 is 7. So she took 1/7 of the box. Okay. Which ratio is equal to 31%? So remember, percent just means out of 100. So 31% is the same thing as 31 over 100. So the ratio version of that would look right here, 31 to 100. Okay. A nurse needs to administer 0.5 gram of medicine to a patient every hour until the patient receives 2,500 milligrams worth of medicine. If the nurse is prompt on her care, how many times will the nurse give the patient medicine? Okay, so we need to go from grams to milligrams so that we can figure this question out. So 0.5 grams is equal to how many milligrams? Okay, so if we remember before, there are 1,000 milligrams in a gram. Okay, so this would be the same thing. I just multiply this times 1,000 to get my answer. Okay, so 1/2 times 1,000 is 500. So each dose is 500 milligrams, and she needs to get 2,500 in total. So I'll just take the total she needs and divide it by each dose, and plugging that in, you would get 5. So she should need to get the medication 5 times. Okay. What is 0345 20 seconds in a 12-hour clock time? So because this beginning hour here, 0300, that is less than 12. We know that we're talking about AM. Okay, so it either has to be this one or this one. Okay, and since it's before 12, we just keep it as is. So it should just be 3:45 and 20 seconds. All right, we have made it all the way to our last question. Thanks for sticking with it. Let's do this one final question together. And don't forget to check out all those links for some of these awesome resources for the HESI exam. So final question, we're going to evaluate the expression when A equals 3 and B equals 5. We have 4A plus 2B. Okay, so we're going to plug in 3 for A, so 4 times 3, and 5 for B, so 2 times 5. 4 times 3 is 12. 2 times 5 is 10. Go ahead and put those together. 12 plus 10 gives me 22 as my final answer. All right, you did it. We made it through the final question. We finished our test, and you guys did amazing. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you the best of luck as you continue to study.